The moment Colt Briggs put his hand on her shoulder, everything changed. He outweighed her by 50 pounds. He had 6 inches on her, and he had never once in his life met a consequence he couldn't walk away from. He grabbed her shoulder to push her back. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Claire caught his wrist, one turn of her hips, weight dropping low, and Colt Briggs, 19 years old, 210 pounds, was on his knees on the library floor. His arm extended at an angle that made moving feel like a terrible idea. He looked up at her. She looked down at him. Calm, completely calm. "We're done here," she said. She let go. Colt stood up slowly, face red. He looked at Ryan. Ryan said nothing. He was looking at Claire the way you look at something when you realize you have been completely, fundamentally wrong about what it was. They left without another word. The library was very quiet. 2 weeks earlier, Claire and Megan Aldrich were just the new girls. Nobody knew about the 14 years, the grandmother, the wooden box. Nobody knew what they were walking into, and neither did Ryan Holt. There are things passed down without words. Not money, not property. Something quieter than that. A recipe written on the back of an envelope, a way of humming while washing dishes, the exact angle of a shoulder when someone tries to make you feel small. Dorothy Aldrich had hands that told her whole story. Knuckles thick from 40 years of training. Palms calloused in places most people never develop calluses. And when she folded that black belt, she did it the same way, every single time. Slowly, deliberately, like she was folding something sacred. Which she was. Her granddaughters watched her do it one last time before they left Nashville. Claire stood on the left, Megan on the right, both 18. Both quiet in the way that comes from years of learning when to move and when to be still. Dorothy placed the folded obi inside the small wooden box. She closed the lid, pressed her palms flat against the top for just a moment, the way you might press your hand against a door you're not sure you want to leave behind. Then she looked up. "You already know everything you need to know," she said. Claire picked up the box with both hands, not because it was heavy, because it mattered. Dorothy watched them from the front step as they left the car. She stood straight, arms at her sides, no wave, no dramatic goodbye. Just present, the way she had always been present. Completely and without reservation. She was 74 years old. She had no hair right now because of the chemotherapy, but she had the posture of someone who had never in her life apologized for taking up space. Claire looked back once from the car window. Dorothy nodded. One nod, clean, certain. Claire turned back around and looked at the road ahead. The drive from Nashville to Greystone Falls takes about 2 hours on a good day. It took them 2 hours and 40 minutes because Claire missed an exit, and neither of them wanted to admit they were nervous. Greystone Falls, Tennessee. Population 4,200 and some change depending on the season. Tucked into the foothills of the Appalachians like something the rest of the world had half forgotten. Oak trees older than the town itself. A main street with a diner, a hardware store, a barber shop, and a pharmacy that also sold birthday cards and fishing lures. The kind of place where everybody knew your car before they knew your name. Their mother, Sarah Aldrich, had taken a bookkeeping job at Caldwell Timber, the largest employer in the county. After 2 years of contract work that never turned into anything permanent, after 2 years of watching her daughters wear shoes with thin soles and never complain, she had finally gotten a call that changed things. But the contract had a clause. Her children had to be enrolled in the local school district within 30 days of her start date. So Claire and Megan came first while Sarah finished the paperwork in Nashville. They were staying with Patty Greer, an old friend of their mother's who had a spare bedroom, and a cat named Walter who wanted nothing to do with either of them. They pulled into Patty's driveway at 4:20 in the afternoon. Patty came out on the porch with a dish towel over her shoulder and said, "You look just like your mother did at your age." Lord. Then she said dinner would be ready in 40 minutes and disappeared back inside. Walter was sitting in the front window. He looked at them. He left. They carried their bags inside and found the spare room. 2 beds pushed spots opposite walls. A window facing east. A wooden shelf above the radiator that was just the right size. Claire set the wooden box on the shelf. Megan stood in the middle of the room and looked around. "It'll do," she said. "It'll do fine," Claire said. Neither of them fully believed that yet, but they both said, and that was how you started. That night, after Patty's spaghetti and after Walter had made a brief appearance to knock a pen off the kitchen counter and leave again, Claire and Megan sat in the spare room with the lights low. Megan had a notebook. She was making a list of things they still needed. School supplies, mostly. A few groceries Patty didn't usually buy. Claire was looking at the wooden box on the shelf. She was thinking about her grandmother's surgery. 8 days. That was all. Saturday morning, 8 days from now, Dorothy Aldrich would go into an operating room in Nashville. The surgery itself wasn't the part that scared Claire. Dorothy had faced scarier things than surgery, with more composure than most people managed facing a parking ticket. What scared Claire was the cost of it. She had overheard enough of her mother's late-night phone calls to know the number, not because Sarah had told her, but because walls in small Nashville apartments were not particularly thick, and Claire had always been a light sleeper. This job at Caldwell Timber was not just a job. It was the difference between being able to take care of Dorothy and not being able to. Claire knew that. Megan knew that. Their mother probably didn't know that they knew, which was a thing they had decided to leave alone because Sarah Aldrich had enough to carry, without also carrying the knowledge that her daughters had heard her crying at the kitchen table at midnight. "We need to be careful here," Claire said. Megan didn't look up from her list. "I know. Mom can't lose this job." "I know, Claire." A pause. "Graham would say, 'Don't borrow trouble,'" Megan said. "Deal with what's in front of you. What's in front of us is a new school on Monday. Then let's start there." Claire nodded. She reached up and touched the wooden box. The grain of the wood was smooth under her fingertips. Dorothy had made the box herself years ago. In a woodworking class she'd taken on a Tuesday night because she had decided she wanted to learn something new. That was Dorothy Aldrich, 74 years old, no hair, in the middle of chemotherapy, and she had still managed to fold that belt with steady hands and look at her granddaughters like she had absolutely no doubt about them. Claire was going to earn that look. She closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them and said, "Okay, Monday." Greystone Falls High School sat at the edge of town. 2 stories of red brick, a parking lot with faded painted lines, a marquee sign out front that read "Go Wildcats" in plastic letters that someone had rearranged to say "Go Wild Cats," which was technically the same thing but somehow funnier. Claire and Megan arrived on a Monday morning in September. The fog was still sitting low in the valley. The air smelled like damp leaves, and somewhere beneath that, faintly sawdust from a timber yard on the far edge of town. They walked through the main doors and had that specific experience of being new somewhere. That half second before the environment catches up to your presence, before anyone has decided what to make of you. Claire looked left, looked right, filed things away. She had always been the one who looked first and spoke second. Megan had always been the one who listened to what people said and understood what they meant underneath. Between them, they had rarely been caught off guard. Dorothy had not trained them to be paranoid. She had trained them to be present. There is a difference. The hallway was exactly what you'd expect. Rows of lockers, half of them dented. A trophy case near the office, bulletin boards with club sign-up sheets. Students moving through the space the way water moves, finding its level, following its channels. Most people didn't look up when Claire and Megan came in. A few did. And then Claire saw her. A young woman, maybe 22, walking toward the library at the far end of the hall, carrying a stack of books that was clearly too tall to be sensible. She had the look of someone who had made peace with being overlooked and had decided to sit useful instead. Head slightly down, shoulders slightly inward, careful. The kind of careful that had become second nature. Claire recognized that posture the way you recognize something you've been taught to understand. Her grandmother had a name for it, making yourself smaller to survive. Dorothy had spent her entire career teaching people to unlearn it. The young woman disappeared through the library door. Claire kept walking. They stopped at the office to collect their schedules. The secretary, Mrs. Dabney, had reading glasses on a beaded chain and the efficient warmth of someone who had processed hundreds of new students and had decided they all deserved a decent welcome. "The twins," she said when she looked up at them. "Yes, ma'am," Claire said. "Same homeroom. Mr. Harcastle. He's good people." She stamped their papers. "Just don't be late. He really hates that." "We won't be," Megan said. Mrs. Dabney looked at them both for a moment over the top of her glasses. Something in their stillness seemed to register with her. She handed them their schedules and said simply, "Good luck." The route to homeroom took them past the gymnasium. Claire slowed without deciding to. She looked through the narrow window in the gym door. Hardwood floor, high ceilings, the specific quality of light that gymnasiums have, somewhere between institutional and almost sacred. She stood there for 3 seconds. Megan had already walked a few steps ahead. She stopped, looked back. "Rubber underlayer beneath the wood," Claire said quietly. Megan glanced at the window. Regulation? Looks like it. Good give. Megan nodded once. Then she started walking again. To anyone passing by, it was two girls no sitting on the gym floor. Unremarkable, forgettable. But what had actually happened was this. Claire had assessed the surface, calculated the friction coefficient and likely compression, noted the ceiling height, measured the distance to the nearest wall in rough feet, filed the room the way Dorothy had taught her to file every room she entered. "You are never just walking into a space," Dorothy used to say. "You are always arriving somewhere. Know where you are before you decide what you're doing there." They had been 4 years old when she started teaching them that. Not kicks, not punches, not yet. Just how to arrive. Homeroom was uneventful until the door opened 4 minutes after the bell. He came in without knocking. Nobody who moved like that ever knocked. Ryan Holt was 19 years old, broad through the shoulders with the easy confidence of someone who had never had to build it because it had always simply been assumed. Dark hair, relaxed smile, a varsity jacket worn the way actors wear costumes in movies about high school. He said, "Morning, hark," to Mr. Hardcastle the way you talk to someone when you know they won't push back. Then he dropped into a seat near the front like he was doing the chair a favor. Mr. Hardcastle said, "You're late, Mr. Holt." Ryan said, "My bad." He didn't sound like it was his bad. Mr. Hardcastle moved on. Right behind Ryan came a taller, heavier boy who took the next seat without particular ceremony. Colt Briggs. Claire didn't know his name yet, but she registered him, bigger than Ryan. Louder in the way people are when they feel the need to fill space. She registered both of them. Then she turned and looked out the window and thought about her grandmother's hands folding that belt. Slow, deliberate, like every fold meant something. Because it did. Lunch was at 11:47. The cafeteria smelled like every school cafeteria in America. Tater tots, industrial cleaner, something unidentifiably sweet, drifting from the direction of the dessert station. Claire and Megan took their trays to a table near the windows. Not the center of the room, not the back corner. A position with sight lines in most directions. This was not a strategic decision exactly. It was just how they sat. They had been there about 5 minutes when they heard the voice. Not loud, not angry. Worse than that. It was the kind of voice that makes itself pleasant so it can cut more cleanly. "Come on, Norma. It's funny. Look." Claire looked over without turning her head. The young woman from the hallway. She was standing at a table about 15 feet away, and Ryan Holt was sitting across from her with a small notebook open in his hands. Her notebook. He was reading from it in a mock-serious voice, tilting it toward Colto so they could laugh together. Norma stood very still. Her hand was out, palm up. "Give it back," she said quietly, "please." "1 second, Ryan said. He turned a page. Claire knew what that kind of stillness cost. She had spent years learning a different response to that feeling. But she knew the feeling itself very well. She set her fork down. She stood up. She carried her tray to the adjacent table and sat down like it was the most natural thing in the world. Ryan stopped reading. He looked at her. Not hostile yet, just recalibrating. "Can I help you?" he said. "I'm good," Claire said. "Just better light over here." It wasn't better light. That wasn't the point. She looked at Ryan and said, in a voice that was level and clear and entirely without aggression, "That notebook doesn't belong to you." The small radius around that table went quiet. Ryan tilted his head. He was deciding if she was serious. She was completely serious. "Excuse me?" he said. "The notebook," she said again, same tone. "It belongs to her. I imagine she'd like it back." Colt leaned forward. "Who are you?" "Claire Aldrich," she said. "We just moved here." Megan had stood up from their original table. She walked over and sat across from Claire, setting her tray down with the particular calm of someone who had decided something and was not reconsidering it. Ryan looked from Claire to Megan, back to Claire. He closed the notebook. He slid across the table toward Norma slowly, with one finger, like he was still deciding how much to give back. "You should be more careful," he said to Claire. He smiled when he said it. "New kid advice. You don't know how things work here yet." "Then I'm still learning," Claire said. She picked up her fork and continued eating. Ryan sat with that for a moment. Nobody at his table said anything. Then he stood up, gestured to Colt, and the group moved away. Norma grabbed her notebook. She held it against her chest with both arms. She didn't say anything to Claire. She didn't have to. Claire gave her a small nod and turned back to her lunch. Megan was already eating. Across the cafeteria, Ryan found a different table. He sat down. He said something to Colt that made Colt laugh. But Ryan wasn't laughing. He was watching Claire. Tuesday and Wednesday passed in the specific rhythm of a new place where you're learning the patterns before you can understand them. Claire and Megan went to class, did their work, observed. They were good students, quietly and without spectacle. Not because they needed to perform intelligence, but because Dorothy had been very firm on this point. Your mind is your first weapon, she used to say, and the most underrated one. Train it first. Train it always. So they paid attention. In every class. To the material and to everything else. In biology, Claire answered a question about the structural properties of bone with an accuracy that made the teacher blink. 14 years of karate includes, when you have a teacher like Dorothy, a working knowledge of the human body. Not theoretical, practical. The kind of understanding that comes from knowing exactly what happens to a wrist when force is applied at the wrong angle. She didn't explain where the knowledge came from. She just answered the question and moved on. In English, Megan wrote a short analysis of a poem that the teachers were asked to keep as an example for next year's class. She handed it over without a big reaction. It wasn't false modesty. She just didn't particularly need external confirmation of things she already knew. Dorothy had taught them that too. Know your value. Don't perform it. On Wednesday afternoon, they saw Norma in the library. She was shelving books with the particular efficiency of someone who loved the work. She saw them come in and something shifted in her expression. Not warmth exactly. More like the recognition of people who had not, when given the opportunity, looked away. She gave them a small nod. They gave one back. Nobody spoke. Nothing needed to be said. Thursday came. The afternoon was clear, the fog finally gone, and the light in the parking lot was that particular copper color that September afternoons sometimes get in Tennessee, everything looking slightly warmer than it actually was. Claire and Megan came through the side exit after the last bell. Ryan and Holt were by the truck, not blocking the path, not quite. Just positioned in the way that requires you to either walk past close or adjust your route, and either option is a form of answer. Claire and Megan walked straight ahead. They didn't slow down. "Hey," Ryan said. They kept walking. "Hey." Louder now. They stopped. Not because they had to. Stopping was a choice. Walking away from something you'd already decided to engage with was a different kind of retreat, and both of them knew it. Claire turned around. Ryan came a few steps forward. Holt followed, slightly to the right, slightly behind. A positioning that might have been habit, might have been learned. Probably both. "You're from Nashville," Ryan said, friendly tone, informational. "Yes," Claire said. "What brought you to Greystone Falls?" "Our mom's job." He nodded like this was very interesting. Then he said, "Small towns are different. There's a whole set of things you'd just know if you'd grown up here. Who people are, how things work, what matters." Claire waited. "My dad is Gerald Holt," Ryan said. "He's been the superintendent of schools in this county for 14 years. The way things run here, the way the district functions, it's because of people like him, people like my family." He paused. "Let that settle. I just think it's worth knowing the landscape," he said, "before you try to change anything about it." Holt moved another half step to the right, not aggressive, not quite, just present in a way that was designed to be noticed. Megan noticed. She didn't move, but her weight shifted very slightly to the balls of her feet. Ryan looked at Claire and waited for something. Acknowledgement, probably. The particular look of someone who has just understood the shape of what they're dealing with, and adjusted accordingly. Claire looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "You know what I've noticed about people who actually have power?" Ryan's expression didn't change, but something behind it did. "They don't usually need to explain it to strangers," she said. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even particularly aggressive. It was just accurate. And accuracy, delivered calmly, can land harder than anything loud. Holt made a sound, the dismissive kind, designed to take up the space that silence had suddenly created. "All right," he said. "Whatever. Just remember what he said." Ryan looked at Claire one more second. Then he looked at Megan. Megan was watching him the way you watch something you're in the process of understanding. Ryan turned around and walked back to the truck. Holt followed, saying something under his breath that Claire didn't catch and didn't need to. They waited until the truck pulled out of the lot. Then they walked home. Neither of them spoke for a full block. Finally, Megan said, "Holt moved to the right." "I saw," Claire said. "He's done that before. It's a learned behavior. Someone taught him how to flank." Claire nodded slowly. "Ryan's the planner," Megan said. "Holt's the escalation." "Yes, another half block. His father is the superintendent," Claire said, "which means the school reports to his father. The principal reports to his father. Any complaint we make goes through a system his father controls." "Yes." "That's not a bully," Megan said. "That's a bully with infrastructure." "I know." They walked past the pharmacy, past the hardware store. A man outside the barber shop lifted a hand in a half wave at nobody in particular. which was either a local custom or he thought he recognized them. "Mom can't lose this job," Claire said. "I know, and Graham's surgery is Saturday week." "I know, Claire. So we don't do anything that I know." Megan stopped walking. She turned to look at her sister. "I know all of that. I did the same math you did." She paused. "But not doing anything is also a choice, and it has its consequences too." Claire looked at her. Megan started walking again. "We observe," she said. "For now." "For now," Claire agreed. Friday afternoon, Claire went to the library alone. Megan had stayed after class to talk to the history teacher about an assignment. Claire had a Tennessee land rights project due, and the school library was closer than the public one. She found the relevant section, pulled 2 books, carried them to a table, set them down with the flat of her palm. "You hold things differently than most people." The voice came from the returns desk. The man behind it was older, somewhere in his late 60s, thin but upright, with the posture of someone who had once been something and had not entirely let go of it. Reading glasses on a cord, eyes that were paying attention. Claire looked up. "Sorry?" "The way you placed those books," he said. Not accusatory, just noting it, palm flat, weight distributed deliberately. Most people just drop things. She looked at the books, then at him. "I didn't realize I was doing it," she said, which was close to true. He studied her for a moment. The way she was sitting, back straight, both feet flat, hands open on the table. He nodded to himself. He didn't explain what he was nodding at. He stood up, went to a different shelf, came back, and set the book to the side of the returns pile. Then he looked at her. "When you're done with those," he said, "you might want to look at this one." He slid it toward the edge of the desk. She came to get it. The cover read, "The History of Martial Arts in America, 1900 to 2000. Claire stood at the desk holding it. She looked at the man. He was already back to the returns pile. "I'm Everett Calloway," he said, without looking up. "I'm here until 5. If you need help finding anything." Claire carried the book back to her table. She sat down. She opened it to the first page. Then, after a moment, she turned to the index. She looked up Aldrich, Dorothy. The entry was on page 247. She turned to it. There was a photograph, black and white, a little grainy, the way photographs from the early 80s tend to look. A woman in a dojo, wearing a white gi, black belt at her waist. She was standing in a ready stance. Her expression was the one Claire knew better than any other face in the world. Certain, completely certain. The caption beneath it read, "Dorothy Aldrich, Nashville, Tennessee. First woman in the state to achieve 5th Dan in Shotokan Karate. National championship titles in 1985 and 1987. Technical advisor, FBI Academy Physical Training Program, Quantico, 1993. Claire looked at that photograph for a long time. She had seen pictures of her grandmother young before. But not this one, not this specific look. She thought about what it must have taken. A woman in 1981 walking into a room with 3 skeptical men on a testing board, standing there for 4 hours, answering every doubt they brought with skill they simply could not argue with. Dorothy had never talked about that day in detail, but Claire understood it now in a way she maybe hadn't before. She understood it because she had just spent a week in a town that had its own version of that room. Different stakes, different opponents, but the same fundamental dynamic. Someone with power deciding whether you belonged. And the only answer that mattered being who you actually were. She closed the book. She looked toward the returns desk. Everett Calloway was watching her, not intrusively, just present. The way someone watches when they've seen something they recognize and are waiting to see if the recognition holds. "The woman in the photograph on page 247, Claire said. Everett didn't answer right away. "She trained me," Claire said. Something moved in Everett Calloway's expression. Something that was not quite surprise and not quite confirmation. More like the quiet settling of something he had been half expecting. He took off his glasses and cleaned them with the front of his shirt. "Put them back on." "Is that so?" he said. It wasn't a question. "She's my grandmother," Claire said. Everett was quiet for a moment. "How is she?" he said. The way he said told Claire he knew something. Not everything, but something. "She's in chemotherapy," Claire said. "Surgery next Saturday." Everett nodded once. The kind of nod that carries more than agreement. "I was a civil rights attorney in Nashville," he said, after a moment. 1980 through 1997. "I came across your grandmother's name in a case involving a dojo lease dispute. She was fighting for the right to maintain a women's training space in a building whose owner wanted her out." He paused. "She won," he said. "She usually does," Claire said. "I retired from law because of my heart," he said. "I come here 3 days a week because I like books and I like being useful." I am not, currently, either particularly useful or particularly healthy. He said this without self-pity, just as information. But I still have an active law license. And I still remember every piece of Tennessee education code I ever needed. He picked up the next book in the returns pile. I'm telling you that, he said, in case it ever becomes relevant. Claire looked at him. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet, he said. I haven't done anything. She gathered her books and her bag. At the door, she stopped. Mr. Calloway, she said. He looked up. You recognize the way I set those books down, she said. What does that tell you? He thought about it for a moment. That whoever taught you, he said, was very, very good. Claire nodded. She walked out and into the Friday afternoon. That evening, Patty's kitchen. Spaghetti again. Walter walking a slow circuit around the table legs like he was conducting an inspection. Patty talked about the town, the Founders' Day parade coming up in October, the new coffee shop that had opened on the south end of Main Street and was already causing conversation. After dinner, Claire and Megan did the dishes. Patty went to watch television. Walter disappeared. There's a man in the school library, Claire said. Megan was drying a plate. Everett Calloway. You know him? I heard his name from Mrs. Dabney when I stopped by the office this afternoon for a form. She mentioned him in passing. She said he used to be a lawyer. Megan stacked the plate. Why? Claire told her about the book, about the photograph, about the conversation. Megan listened without interrupting. When Claire was done, Megan was quiet for a moment. Then she said, an experienced civil rights attorney who knows Tennessee education law, who recognized Graham from a photograph, and asked how she was. Yes. And who happens to work 3 days a week in the school library. Yes. Megan considered this. Do you believe in that kind of coincidence? She said. Claire thought about it. Graham would say coincidence is what you call something when you haven't looked hard enough for the pattern, she said. Megan put down the dish towel. They walked to the spare room. The wooden box was on the shelf, where Claire had put it. Claire sat on her bed. Megan sat on hers. Outside, the September dark had come down fully over Greystone Falls. Somewhere down the street, a dog was barking at something that had probably stopped being interesting before the barking started. Ryan is going to do something, Megan said. I know, not tomorrow. He's not impulsive. He'll think about it first. He'll talk to his father. I know. Which means whatever comes next won't just be Ryan. Claire looked at the wooden box on the shelf. She thought about her grandmother standing on the front step that morning. No wave, no big speech, just that one nod. Clear and certain. She thought about the photograph in the book, that expression. The one that said, I know exactly who I am, and I am not here to explain it to you, only to demonstrate it if necessary. 14 years. Every morning before school. Every Saturday, every summer, 4 hours minimum. Sometimes 6. Not to become a weapon. Dorothy had been very clear about that. You are not training to hurt people, she used to say. You are training to not need to. You are training so that fear has nowhere to land. Because a person without fear makes completely different decisions than a person who has it. And those decisions change everything. Claire understood that now in her body, not just her mind. She understood it the way you understand something after years of repetition and have made it true all the way down. She reached up and touched the wooden box. We observe, she said. For now, Megan said. For now. Outside, the dog stopped barking. The town went quiet. And somewhere across Greystone Falls, in a house with a home office and a nameplate on the desk that read Gerald Holt, Superintendent, a man who had run this county's schools for 14 years, picked up the phone. His son had called. He listened. He said very little. And then, before he hung up, he said the thing he saw when someone in this town had made the mistake of becoming a problem. I'll handle it. Monday came in gray and quiet, the kind of morning that doesn't announce itself, just arrives flat and steady, like it has business to attend to and no interest in being noticed. Claire was up before the alarm. She sat on the edge of her bed in the dark and did what Dorothy had taught her to do before any day that mattered. She breathed. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out. Not to calm herself down. She wasn't panicked, just to arrive in the day deliberately rather than getting dragged into it sideways. Dorothy called it setting your foundation. Before you do anything, she used to say, know where you're standing. Claire knew where she was standing. She was standing in a borrowed room in a town that didn't know her yet. She was standing 6 days from her grandmother's surgery. She was standing inside a situation that had not finished developing. She breathed. Then she got up and made her bed with the corners tucked the way Dorothy had taught her, and went to make coffee before Megan woke up. They were halfway through breakfast when Patty's landline rang. Patty answered it in the kitchen, the old-fashioned way, with the receiver pressed against her ear and her body angled toward the wall the way people used to stand when phone calls were private, conducted in specific locations. Claire and Megan ate their toast. Patty said, several times. Then she said, "Is that right?" Then she said, "I see." Then she hung up and came back to the table and poured herself more coffee without sitting down. "That was Darlene Marsh," she said. "Works the front desk at the county administration building." She took a sip of coffee. Apparently Gerald Holt had a meeting this morning, early, before the regular staff got in. Claire and Megan looked at each other across the table. Darlene didn't know what it was about, Patty said. But she said when she came in at 8, his door was already closed, and there were 2 cars in the lot that she didn't recognize. She set down her mug. "I don't know what that means," she said. "Maybe nothing." She looked at Claire. "But I thought you should know." She picked up her mug and went to get ready for work. The kitchen was quiet. "That was fast," Megan said. "Ryan talked to him Friday night," Claire said. "He had the weekend to plan. Which means whatever's coming, it's already in motion." Claire looked out the window at the gray morning. "Then we go to school," she said, "and we pay attention." Second week at Greystone Falls High. The atmosphere was different, in the same way that a room is different after someone has moved something in it. You can't immediately identify what's changed, but the space doesn't sit quite right. Students who had been neutral the first week were slightly less neutral now. Not hostile, just aware, the specific awareness that spreads through a small community when someone with influence has started paying attention to something, or someone. Ryan and Colt moved through the hallways the same always. Loud, easy, taking up exactly as much space as they always had. But Ryan's eyes tracked differently. Claire noticed. He was watching to see how she responded to the change in the air, whether she would tighten up, whether she would start avoiding certain hallways, whether the pressure, subtle as it was, would do what pressure usually did here. She responded by doing nothing differently at all. Same routes, same pace, same quality of attention. If that bothered Ryan, he didn't show it. But he kept watching. Monday afternoon, the call came to their mother. Sarah Aldrich called Megan at 4:15. Megan stepped outside Patty's back door to take it, standing on the small concrete step while the first cool air of the season moved through the yard. She came back in after 12 minutes. She sat down at the kitchen table across from Claire. "Mom got called in to meet with Gerald Holt," she said, "this afternoon." At the county administration building, Claire put down her pen. "He was very polite," Megan said, "very professional. He told her he was aware of some concerns about her daughter's adjustment to the school environment. He said he wanted to be proactive, get ahead of anything before it became a real issue. He threatened her job. He didn't use those words. He mentioned that the contract with Caldwell Timber required her family's integration into the community. He mentioned that conflicts at the school level could complicate that. Politely. Very politely. Claire was quiet for a moment. "How's Mom?" Megan's jaw moved slightly. "She said she's fine," she said. They both knew what that meant. Sarah Aldrich said she was fine the same way she had said she was fine when their father left. The same way she had said she was fine during the 2 years of contract work that didn't lead anywhere. The same way she had said she was fine when Dorothy's diagnosis came through. She was not fine. She was doing what she always did, which was holding everything together with both hands and refusing to let anyone see the effort. "She asked us to be careful," Megan said, "not to cause problems. She didn't say don't stand up for yourselves, no. She said, be careful, there's a difference." Claire nodded slowly. "Gerald Holt went after Mom," she said. "He went after the thing Mom needs," Megan said. "Which is worse, he didn't threaten her. He threatened her ability to take care of a Graham. The word sat between them for a moment. "Graham, 6 days. He's good at this," Claire said. "He's been doing it for 14 years, Megan said. He knows exactly how much pressure to apply. Just enough to make people recalculate. He expects us to recalculate, yes." Claire picked up her pen again, then put it down again. "We're not going to," she said. "No," Megan said. "We're not." Tuesday morning. Coach Diana Reed ran the physical education class at Greystone Falls High, with the particular authority of someone who had been doing it for 23 years and had stopped needing to prove herself somewhere around year 4. She was 61 years old. Short gray hair. Arms that looked like she still trained regularly, which she did 3 mornings a week at the YMCA 2 towns over where she took a judo class that she had been attending, on and off, for the better part of 3 decades. She was not especially interested in being people's friend. She was very interested in being useful. The fitness assessment that Tuesday was standard. Running, jumping, flexibility, a set of balance and coordination exercises she had developed herself over the years. She ran her classes through it twice a year and kept records going back to 1998 in a filing cabinet in her office. Claire and Megan went through the circuit. They did it the way they did most things in this school, competently, without spectacle, doing what was asked and no more than what was asked. But Coach Reed had been watching bodies move for 23 years. She saw it anyway, the way Claire landed from a jump, not on her heels, not flat-footed, but with that specific rolling contact that starts at the ball of the foot and distributes the impact upward through a flexible chain of joints. It was textbook euchemy, the kind of thing you develop only through years of practice. The way Megan moved through the balance exercise. Her center of gravity was not where most 18-year-olds give it. It was lower, deliberately, unconsciously lower. The body position of someone whose training had moved their baseline. Coach Reed didn't say anything during the class. She watched. She noted. After the bell, she stopped them at the door. "Aldrich," she said. Both of them turned, which she noted too. "Can I have a minute?" They stayed. The other students filed out. Coach Reed waited until the room was empty. She sat on the edge of the equipment table with her arms crossed and looked at both of them. "How long?" she said. Claire looked at her. 14 years, she said. Coach Reed nodded. "Shotokan," she said. "Not a question." "Yes," Megan said. "I took judo for about 12 years, Coach Reeds. I know what train looks like, and I know what trained for a long time looks like." She paused. "Those are two different things." Neither of them responded. "I'm not asking for a demonstration," she said. "I'm just telling you that I see it." She looked from one to the other. "And I'm telling you that in this school, what I see matters to me, because what I see affects what I'm willing to do." She let that land. "You're having a rough start here," she said. It wasn't a question. "We're adjusting," Claire said. "Sure," Reed said. She stood up. "My door is the third one down that hall. It's open at lunch on Tuesdays and Thursdays." She picked up her clipboard. "Just so you know." She walked toward her office without looking back. Claire and Megan stood in the empty gym. The floor had that rubber underlayer that Claire had noted their first morning. The ceiling was high. The light was the particular gymnasium kind. "She knows," Megan said. "She knows something," Claire said. "She doesn't know everything. She wants to." "Yes." They picked up their bags and walked out into the hallway. Wednesday arrived the way consequential days sometimes do, without warning, without fanfare. Just an ordinary afternoon that becomes something else entirely. Norma was in the periodicals section at 3:50 when she heard the front door. She knew the sound before she knew what she was hearing. The particular way certain people move through a space they've decided belongs to them. Ryan's voice, then Colt's. They found her between the shelves. Ryan leaned against the end of the rack. Colt stood in the opening. And what followed was what always followed. The careful pleasantness that wasn't pleasant. The mentions of family businesses and complications. The suggestion that Norma might want to reconsider whose side she was on. Norma stood with her hands on the magazines. She had done this before. The standing still. The waiting for it to be over. Then Colt picked up a stack of periodicals she had just organized and dropped them on the floor. Not hard, not violent, just deliberate. The kind of thing that says, "I can do this and there's nothing you can do about it."
"Pick those up,"
he said. Not to Norma, to nobody in particular. Everett Callowake appeared from behind the reference section. 68 years old, thin heart that gave him trouble on good days. He stood in the aisle and said, "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Colt looked at him the way certain people look at obstacles. Mind your business, old man." He took a step toward Everett, and Claire Aldrich stepped through the library door. She had come to return a book. She had heard the voices from the hall. She had taken in the geometry of the room in the first second. Colt moving toward Everett, Ryan watching, Norma against the shelves, the scattered magazines on the floor. "Hey," she said. Colt turned. She walked toward him. Not fast, not slow, the walk of someone who knows exactly where they're going and has already decided what comes next. "Back off," Colt said. He was bigger than her by 50 pounds and half a foot, and he'd been using that fact his whole life. He put his hand on her shoulder to push her back. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Claire caught his wrist. Not grabbing, receiving, the way you receive something being handed to you. Her other hand found the back of his elbow, one turn of her hips, weight dropping low and forward. And Colt Briggs found himself on his knees on the library floor with his arm extended at an angle that made moving seem like a very bad idea. He hadn't been pushed. He hadn't been thrown. He had simply been redirected with the kind of efficiency that comes from 14 years of understanding exactly how body works and exactly how much force is needed. He looked up at her. She looked down at him, not angry, not triumphant, just present. "We're done here," she said. She released his wrist. Holt stood up slowly, face red, and looked at Ryan. Ryan was very still. He was looking at Claire the way you look at something when you've fundamentally misunderstood what it was. Claire turned to Everett. "Are you okay?" "Fine," he said. His voice was steady. But he sat down on the edge of the nearest table. Ryan and Colt left without another word. The library was very quiet. Norma looked at Claire from between the shelves. Then she looked at the magazines on the floor. She bent down and started picking them up. Claire bent down and helped her. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Norma said very quietly, "What was that?" "Something my grandmother taught me," Claire said. Everett watched them from the table. He had seen a great many things in his 68 years. But he sat there in the library quiet and thought about Dorothy Aldrich in a Nashville courtroom 30 years ago. The way she had walked in. The way she had taken her seat. The way she had already won before anyone said a word. He understood now why. Claire and Megan were at Patty's kitchen table when the text came in. Megan read it. She passed the phone to Claire without a word. It was from Norma, short, no punctuation, just the facts as they had happened. Claire read it. "Read it again. Set the phone down." He went to her, Claire said. "He's building the perimeter," Megan said. "Isolating. Making sure nobody who saw anything last week will say anything later." "That's not impulsive." "No," Megan said. "That's a plan." Claire stood up, walked to the window. The yard was getting dark, the oak tree at the back of the lot turning into a shape rather than a thing. "Scared," she said. Megan looked at her. "Not of us," Claire said. "Of losing the ability to be not scared. That's different." She turned around. "People like Ryan, they don't actually feel powerful. They feel the constant threat of not being powerful. And they manage that threat by making sure everyone around them is slightly afraid." "Graham's theory," Megan said. "Graham's theory," Claire confirmed. "And it's right." She came back to the table. "We need to go to the library tomorrow," she said. "Not for Ryan. For Norma." Megan nodded. "And for Everett Calloway," Claire said. "Thursday afternoon, the library." Everett was at the returns desk when they came in. He looked up over his glasses and gave them the small nod he had given Claire on Friday. The kind of nod that means I see you and I remember and I'm paying attention. Claire sat down at the same table as before. She pulled out her history assignment, opened her notebook. She worked for 20 minutes. Then she looked up and said, "Mr. Calloway, can I ask you something?" He set down the book he was cataloging. "Gerald Holt," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "What about him?" he said. "He's been superintendent for 14 years, she said. "In a county this size, that's a long time." "It is," Everett said. "Has he always been like this?" Everett took off his glasses, cleaned them with his shirt the way he had before, put them back on. "Gerald Holt is a particular kind of man," he said, "the kind that mistakes authority for ownership." He paused. "When you're in charge of the only school system in a small county, you develop relationships with every family whose children go through that system. Employers, property owners, people who owe you things in the complicated way that small towns accumulate debts." He looked at Claire. "He's not corrupt in the way people usually mean when they say that word. He doesn't take money, he trades in something harder to prove. Favors, pressure. The understanding that things can be made easier or harder depending on whether you're cooperative. And nobody's ever pushed back," Claire said. "People have tried," Everett said. "3 that I know of directly from before I came here. Students, mostly, or parents. They filed out complaints. The complaints went through the county system, which reports us to Holt's office." He paused again. "They withdrew, moved, decided it wasn't worth it. Because he went after what they needed," Megan said. She had come to stand beside Claire's table, without either of them noticing exactly when. Everett looked at her. "Yes," he said, "exactly that." The library was quiet. Late afternoon, it only came through the high windows, the kind that caught dust in the air and made it visible. "He talked to our mother," Claire said, "yesterday, about her job." Everett nodded slowly. He looked at them both for a moment. Then he said, "Your grandmother." "Yes," Claire said. "When I worked in Nashville," he said carefully, "I came across Dorothy Aldrich's name in a case involving a property dispute. She was fighting for the right to keep her dojo in a building where the owner had decided to raise her rent to a level designed to force her out." He paused. The owner had relationships with people who could have made the legal process very slow and very expensive. "What happened?" Megan said. "Your grandmother documented everything," Everett said. Every conversation, every pressure applied, every intermediary, she built a record so clean and so complete that when the case finally went before a judge, there was nothing to argue with, just facts. He looked at them steadily. She didn't win because she was angry. She won because she was thorough. He let that sit for a moment. I retired from law because of my heart, he said. But I still think the way a lawyer thinks, and I still have a license. He looked down at the book on his desk. If someone were to begin documenting things, I would be in a position to advise them on what a court would find useful. Claire looked at Megan. Megan looked at Claire. Mr. Calloway, Claire said, why are you doing this? He considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Because I have been retired for 9 years, he said. And in that time I have shelved a great many books and watered a great many plants, and watched a great many things happen in this building that I told myself were not my business. He straightened the book on his desk. I am 71 years old with a problematic heart and a perfectly functional law license. At some point, the excuse of not being business stops being honest. He picked up the next book in the returns pile. Besides, I says, almost to himself, Dorothy Aldrich won her case. I always thought that was the right outcome. They left the library at 4:20. The afternoon was cooler now. October was coming at the edge of things, the light changing slightly each day. They walked half a block before Megan said, we need evidence. Yes, Claire said, real evidence, not testimony, not our account of events, something that exists independently. Calloway said, document everything. We've been here 2 weeks, Megan said. We haven't been documenting anything. Claire thought about that. We document from here, she said, everything going forward. Dates, times, exactly what was said, exactly who was there. That helps with what happens next, Megan said, not with what's already happened. They walked another half block. Ryan and Holt came to the library on Wednesday, Claire said. Were there any cameras? Megan had already thought about this. There's a camera at the entrance, she said. Standard security. It would show them entering. It wouldn't show what happened in the periodicals section, but it would show they were there. Yes, if the footage still exists. Schools typically keep security footage for 2 to 4 weeks. Claire nodded. I'll ask Norma if she'd be willing to give a written account, she said. Date, time, what was said. She might not be willing, Megan said. He threatened her family. He did, Claire said, but she texted us. She didn't have to do that. Megan considered this. She's closer than he thinks, she said. Yes. They reached Patty Street and turned. There's something else, Megan said. Claire waited. Ryan told Norma to walk away from us because of trouble we're bringing, Megan said. He said misunderstanding between him and us. Right. He's already building the story, Megan said. We're the problem. We're the outside element that came in and disrupted things. Whatever happens next, he wants it to look like our fault. Which means whatever happens next, we need it to be very clear who started it, Claire said. Yes. They stopped at Patty's front walk. We need him to show who he is, Megan said. On the record. People like Ryan don't show it in private, Claire said. They show it when they feel safe. When they have an audience and they think they have control. So we wait for him to feel safe, Megan said. And we make sure someone's watching when he's said, Claire said. The next day came. Friday afternoon, library, 3:55. Norma was in the periodicals section again. Not because she hadn't thought about avoiding it. She had thought about it all day. She had spent the morning telling herself she would take a different route, finish early, be somewhere else when 4 o'clock came. But she was there. Same time, same shelves. When Claire and Megan came in at 3:50, Norma was shelving quietly in the back. She looked up. Claire walked back to her without making it obvious, without announcing herself, just moving through the space. She stood near the shelf and picked up a magazine. You don't have to tell me anything, she said. Her voice was low. I just want you to know that what he said to you in here on Wednesday is not something you have to carry alone. Norma kept shelving. He was very calm about it, she said. He usually is. That's the scariest part. She put a magazine in its slot. When they're calm. Yes, Claire said. Norma was quiet for a moment. My dad's auto shop has been in this town for 32 years, she said. He built it from nothing. He worked 6 days a week for 15 years before he could take a Saturday off. She put another magazine in its slot. Ryan knows that. His father knows that. They know exactly which things to mention. I know, Claire said. Norma turned to look at her. Why are you here, she said. Not unfriendly. Genuinely asking. Because someone did this to you and nobody says anything, Claire said. And I think that's been happening long enough. Norma looked at her for a long moment. I don't want my dad's shop to lose its business license, she said. I understand that. I don't want to be the reason things got harder for my family. I understand that too. But, Norma said. She stopped. She put her hand flat on the shelf. I've been walking around this building with my eyes down for 2 years, and I am so tired. She said the last 2 words very quietly. I am so tired of it. Claire didn't say anything. She waited. If I write down what happened on Wednesday, Norma said. If I write it down exactly, dates, times, what he said, word for word. Yes, Claire said. That's just a piece of paper, Norma said. It's a record, Claire said. And records matter, especially when someone knows what to do with them. Norma looked at her steadily. Is there someone who knows what to do with them? Yes, Claire said, there is. That evening, Claire called her mother. Sarah answered on the second ring. They talked about ordinary things first. How the food was, how school was going, whether the weather in Nashville was doing the same thing it was doing in Greystone Falls. Then Sarah said, how are you really? And Claire told her, not everything, but enough. She told her about Everett Calloway and his law license. She told her about Norma and what she was willing to do. She told her about the camera in the library entrance and the footage that might still exist. She did not tell her about the wooden box on the shelf. She didn't need to. Sarah knew it was there. When Claire was done, Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, your grandmother would say you're being thorough. I'm trying, Claire said. She'd also say that thorough is not the same as invincible, Sarah said. I need you to be careful. Not because I don't trust you, because I love you. I know, Mom, and I need you to know that this job, this whole situation, if it comes down to the job or you two being okay, there is no choice. Do you understand me? There is no choice. We're going to make sure it doesn't come to that, Claire said. You don't know, Mom. Claire paused. You know who Graham is? Yes, Sarah said. And you know who she taught us to be? Another silence. Longer. Yes, Sarah said, and then trust that, Claire said. She could hear her mother breathing on the other end of the line. Saturday, Sarah finally said. I know. 7 days. I know, Mom. Call me tomorrow, Sarah said. I will. After she hung up, Claire sat on the edge of the bed. The room was dark except for the street light coming through the curtain. The wooden box was on the shelf. She could just make out the shape of it. She thought about her grandmother in a hospital bed in Nashville, probably not sleeping well, probably talking the nurses into telling her things they weren't supposed to tell her, probably reading something between rounds of whatever it was they did in chemotherapy. Dorothy Aldrich had never once in her life waited for someone else to fix something. She had also never once in her life done something reckless. There was a difference, she used to say, between being reactive and being deliberate. Reactive is when something happens and you answer it with the first thing that comes. Deliberate is when you have already decided what kind of person you are, so you already know what you're going to do when things happen. Know who you are before the moment comes. Then the moment is never a surprise. Claire looked at the box. She knew who she was. She went to sleep. Saturday and Sunday passed. They documented. They wrote down everything they could remember about each event of the previous 2 weeks. Dates, times, locations, exact words where they could recall them, general meaning where they couldn't. Megan had a system. She always had a system, color-coded by category. Incidents involving Ryan, incidents involving Holt, communications involving Gerald Holt. People present as witnesses, Holt presents as participants. On Sunday afternoon, Everett Calloway responded to the email Claire had sent Friday night. His response was 4 paragraphs long, clear, organized, specific. He told them what categories of documentation would be most useful in an educational misconduct proceeding under Tennessee law. He told them what the timeline requirements were for filing a complaint. He told them that security footage had a variable retention period, and that a formal request to preserve specific footage should be submitted in writing before the end of the following week. He ended with one sentence that Claire read twice. What your grandmother taught you in the dojo is exactly what you need to do here. Stay grounded, observe carefully. Do not move until you understand the whole situation, and when you move precisely. Claire showed the email to Megan. Megan, read it. He knows her, she is. He knows who she is, Claire said. I think that's the same thing to him. Megan handed the phone back. Gerald Holt is going to do something official soon, she said. He's not going to wait much longer. He'll want to act before we establish ourselves too firmly. I know. Whatever he does, he'll use the school's process, which he controls. I know, so we need to be ready before he moves. We're getting there, Claire said. We need to be already there, Megan said. Monday, the beginning of the 3rd week. The day felt different from the moment they walked in. Not obviously, just in the texture of things. The way certain people made very brief eye contact and then looked away. The way the front office had a particular quality of careful activity that suggested something had been set in motion. Everett was not at the library that day. His 3 days were Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Coach Reed saw them in the hallway and gave them the particular look that said she was aware of something without yet knowing what to do about it. Ryan and Colt were conspicuously normal, which was itself a kind of signal. People who are planning something tend to present a very even surface. Ryan moved through the day with the relaxed ease of someone who knows the next move is already arranged and just requires waiting. Claire watched that ease. She filed it. At lunch, Norma sat down across from them. She set a folded piece of paper on the table. "It's everything I remember," she said. "Date, time, what was said." I tried to get as close to the exact words as I could. She didn't look up right away. I wrote it by hand and typed it, and I kept a copy. "Norma," Claire said. She looked up. "Thank you," Claire said. Norma nodded once. Then she stood up and took her tray to another table. She sat with her back straight. She didn't look down at her food when people walked by. It was a small thing. It was not a small thing. At 3:45 that afternoon, Claire and Megan were called to the main office. Mrs. Dabney's expression was carefully neutral in the way that a person's expression is carefully neutral when they feel bad about what they're about to facilitate. "Mr. Holt would like to see you," she said. The superintendent, not at the school. At the county administration building, Gerald Holt's office was everything Ryan's confidence had been promising. Large, orderly, diplomas on the wall, a state-of-the-art phone system on the desk, a view of the town through a window that was sized and positioned to remind visitors that the person behind the desk could see quite a lot from where he sat. Holt stood when they came in, shook their hands, offered them chairs. He was a careful man. Everything about him was considered. The handshake firm but not aggressive, the suit good but not flashy, the expression warm but measuring. He sat back down. "I appreciate you coming in," he said. "I know it's been a busy first couple of weeks." "Thank you for having us," Claire said. He looked at them both. "I want to be honest with you," he said, "because I think you're both intelligent young women and you deserve honor us." He folded his hands on the desk. "There have been some concerns raised about some interactions you've had with other students, about the tone those interactions have taken." He paused. "I'm not here to assign blame. I understand adjusting to a new environment is challenging, but I do have a responsibility to all the students in this district." "Of course," Megan said. "What I'd like to offer," he said, "is a simple path forward. You're new here. First impressions can be corrected. What I'd suggest is a period of lower visibility. Focus on academics. Let the social piece develop more slowly." He smiled. "Does that seem reasonable?" "It seems reasonable," Claire said, "if the situation were what you're describing." He looked at her. "The interactions you're referring to," Claire said, "weren't us having difficulty adjusting. They were us responding to specific things done to specific people." He was still smiling, but something behind the smile had shifted. "I hear you," he said, "and I'm sure it felt that way." "It didn't feel that way," Claire said. "It was that way." The smile held. "I want to help you," he said. "I genuinely do. But I need you to work with me. And that means understanding that in a community like this one, perception matters enormously." He leaned forward slightly. "I'd hate for a misunderstanding to have consequences for your family, for your mother's position, for things that matter to you." He said it the same way Ryan said things, pleasantly, precisely. "I understand what you're saying," Claire said. "I'm glad. I want you to understand something too," she said. He waited. "We came to Greystone Falls because our mother needed a job," she said. "And because our grandmother is having surgery on Saturday, and this job is what makes that possible." She looked at him steadily. "We have every reason to want things to go well here. We have every reason to want to cooperate." "I'm glad to hear, but cooperation goes both ways," she said. "And what's been happening to people in this school is not something we can pretend we didn't see. We're not built that way." He looked at her for a long moment. The warmth in his expression did not disappear exactly. It just became something else. Something underneath the warmth that was colder and more honest. "You have until Friday," he said. "I have a board meeting Friday at 5 o'clock. I'd prefer to go into that meeting without having to address a disciplinary matter. But I will address it if I need to." Claire and Megan stood up. "Thank you for your time," Claire said. They walked out. In the parking lot, the September afternoon had turned fully cool. Their breath was just barely visible. Megan said, "Friday." 5 days, Claire said. "We don't have everything we need." "No," Claire said. "Not yet." She looked back at the building. The window of Holt's office was up there on the second floor. She could see him standing at it, looking down. Tuesday morning, 5 days until Friday. Claire was up before the alarm again. She sat on the edge of her bed in the dark and did the breathing. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. But this time it took longer to settle. The foundation felt different this morning, not shaky, just more aware of it itself. She understood the difference. Dorothy had explained it once after a competition where Claire had gone in overconfident and gotten caught in the second round by someone she should have handled easily. Confidence and certainty are not the same thing, she had said. Not unkindly, just clearly. Confidence is what you feel before you know what you're dealing with. Certainty is what you have after you've understood it completely. She had paused. You were confident this morning. Next time, be certain. Claire was working on certainty. She knew what they had. Norma's written account. The documentation she and Megan had been building for 2 weeks. Everett's knowledge of Tennessee education law. A camera at the library entrance that had recorded Ryan and Holt walking in on Wednesday. She knew what they didn't have. Something that connected Gerald Holt directly. Something that showed the pattern wasn't just his son being a bully, but a system being used deliberately. Something that a board of education would have to look at and could not explain away. She didn't have that yet. 4 days. She got up and made coffee. Tuesday afternoon. Everett was at the returns desk. He looked up when Claire and Megan came in, and his expression told them he already knew about the Monday meeting with Holt. Small towns moved information quickly, especially when the person at the center of the information had been at the center of things for 14 years. I heard, he said, before they could speak. From who? Megan said. Mrs. Dabney called me last night. He set down his book. She and I have known each other for 20 years. She didn't tell me specifics. She told me the general shape of it. He gestured toward by the back table. They sat. He came around from behind the desk and sat across from them. He moved more carefully than before. His heart had been giving him trouble since Tuesday. He had mentioned it briefly to Claire in an email. The kind of mention that tries to be nothing and isn't. He gave you until Friday, Everett said. Yes. Board meeting at 5. Yes. He nodded slowly. Here is what I know about Gerald Holt, he said. He has been careful for 14 years. He has never left a clean paper trail. The pressure he applies is always verbal, always deniable, always framed as concern or helpfulness. He looked at them. What you have right now, normal count in your documentation is important. But in front of a school board that he controls, it becomes your word against his son's word. And his son has had 14 years of his father running interference. We know, Claire said. So what we need, Megan said, is something that doesn't go through him. Everett looked at her. Yes, he said. Exactly. He was quiet for a moment. There is a thing in Tennessee education law, he said carefully, called mandatory external review. It applies when a credible complaint is made that the internal district process has a conflict of interest. He looked at them both steadily. If a complaint is filed with the Tennessee State Board of Education directly, they are required to assign an external reviewer. That reviewer does not report to Gerald Holt. Claire looked at Megan. We'd need the complaint to be credible enough that they couldn't dismiss it, Megan said. Yes, Everett said. Which means we need more than we have, Claire said. Yes, he said again. The library was quiet around them. Late afternoon light through the high windows, the particular piece of a place where people came to find things out. Mr. Calloway, Claire said. You mentioned documenting things, building a record. You mentioned that's how my grandmother won her case. Yes, she documented everything, Claire said. Every conversation, every pressure applied, every person in between. She did. We've been doing that, Claire said, for 2 weeks. But we started late, Everett nodded. What we're missing, Claire said, is what happened before we got here. The library was very quiet. Everett looked at them both. I have been at this school, he said slowly, for 9 years. He let that sit. And in 9 years, he said, I have seen a number of students who were doing fine and then weren't, who started pushing back against something and then stopped, who transferred out or withdrew or simply became much smaller versions of themselves very quickly. He paused. I never connected them. I never wrote anything down. I told myself it wasn't my business. But you remember them, Megan said. I remember everything, he said. It's the curse of a lawyer's training. You retain detail whether you want to or not. He stood up slowly. He went to his desk, opened the bottom drawer, came back with a yellow legal pad and a pen. I'm going to need about an hour, he said. He wrote for an hour and 12 minutes. Claire and Megan worked on their homework. Not because they felt like doing homework, but because Everett needed the space to think without being watched. And because Dorothy had been very clear that you never let a crisis become a reason to fall behind on the things that matter in the long run. At 5:43, Everett set down his pen. He looked the legal pad. 5 incidents, he said, over 9 years. All involving students who became problems for Ryan Holt, all resolved in the same way. Family pressure, job concerns, business license renewals. All of them chose to leave or withdraw rather than escalate. He looked at them. I have names, approximate dates, and in 2 cases specific details that I remember clearly because they struck me as wrong at the time even though I didn't act on them. That's a pattern, Megan said. It's the beginning of one, Everett said. A pattern and proof for different things. But it shows this isn't new, Claire said. It shows it may that it's Everett said carefully. There's a difference. He paused. But yes, in the hands of the right person, with the right authority to investigate, this is enough to open a door. He looked at Claire. There's something else, he said. She waited. 3 years ago, he said, there was an accident on Route 9, east of town. A single-car collision late at night. A truck went off the road and into a ditch. Nobody was seriously hurt, but the driver left the scene before police arrived. He paused. The vehicle was later identified as belonging to Gerald Holt. Claire was very still. There was a witness, Everett said. A man who was coming the other way. He stopped, he called it in. Gave an initial statement to the county sheriff's office. He looked at the table. 3 weeks later, he recanted. Said he'd been mistaken about the vehicle. Case was closed. You know this how? Megan said. Because the witness is a man named Brock Sutton, Everett said. He brings his truck to my neighbor's garage sometimes. And 2 years ago, over a fence in my neighbor's backyard, he told me what actually happened. He was quiet for a moment. He didn't recant because he was mistaken. He recanted because someone came to see him. Someone who mentioned that his business license was up for renewal. The library was very quiet. He told you this, Claire said. He told me and my neighbor both, Everett said. I think he needed someone to know, even if they couldn't do anything with it. But you could do something with it, Megan said. Not without his cooperation, Everett said. He'd have to be willing to say it on the record. And the last time he tried to tell the truth, it cost him. Claire sat with that for a moment. She thought about Norma in the periodicals section, hands shaking, holding herself steady. I am so tired of it. People will be willing, she said, if they understand it's not just them. Maybe, Everett said. Not maybe, she said. When people find out they're not alone, things change. That's not optimism. That's a pattern, too. Everett looked at her. Then he did something she hadn't seen him do before. He smiled, a real one. Not the small acknowledgement nod, but something warmer. Something that looked like recognition. Your grandmother, he said, used to say something like that. I know, Claire said. She still does. That night, Claire called her mother. Sarah answered on the first ring this time. They talked for 22 minutes. When Claire was done explaining, Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, this Everett Calloway, yes. You trust him? Yes, Claire said. I do. Why? Claire thought about it. Because he's been here 9 years watching things go wrong, she said. And he didn't have to help us. We're not giving him anything. We're just giving him a reason to do the thing he already knew he should do. Another silence. Your grandmother would like him, Sarah said. I think she already does, Claire said. He knows who she is. He's known for a long time. She heard her mother take a breath. 5 days, Sarah said. 4 now, Claire said. It's after midnight. 4 days, Sarah said. Graham's surgery is Saturdays, I know. Call me every day. I will. After she hung up, Claire sat in the dark for a long time. She reached up and touched the wooden box. The grain of the wood was familiar now, the particular smoothness of it. She knew it the way you know things you've touched every day for weeks. She thought about her grandmother's hands on the lid, pressing down like a kind of prayer. Wednesday, 3 days. And Wednesday was the day everything changed. Not because of anything Claire or Megan did, because of Brock Sutton. At 7:45 in the morning before school, Megan's phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. She read it. She sat very still. Then she showed it to Claire. The text said, "This is Brock Sutton. Everett Calloway gave me this number. I heard what's happening with you two. I've been sitting on something for 3 years, and I think it's time I stopped sitting on it. Can we talk?" Claire and Megan looked at each other. Megan typed back, "Yes. When and where?" They met him that afternoon at the public library 2 streets over. Not the school library. Somewhere that had nothing to do with Gerald Holt's territory. Brock Sutton was 44 years old and looked like someone who worked with his hands and had been carrying something heavy for a long time. Not tall, solidly built. Dark circles under his eyes that probably weren't recent. He sat across from them at a corner table with a coffee he didn't drink. "Everett told me about you two," he said. "About your grandmother." He looked at the table. "He said she was someone worth knowing. He said she was the kind of person who won because she was right and because she was thorough." He paused. "I don't know anything about karate, but I know what it means when someone says a person is thorough." "Mr. Sutton," Claire said, "you don't have to tell us anything you don't want to." "I know that," he said. "I've had 3 years to decide I didn't want to." He looked up. "I'm here because I do want to." Finally, he took a breath. "I was driving on Route 9 3 years ago, coming home late, and I saw a truck go off the road in front of me. I stopped. I made sure the driver was okay. He was. He left before the sheriff arrived. But I got a good look at him and a good look at the truck." "Gerald Holt," Megan said. "Gerald Holt," he confirmed. "I gave my statement to the sheriff's office. Everything I saw. 3 weeks later, 2 men came to my shop. They weren't from the sheriff's office. They were from the county administration." He paused. "They were very polite. They mentioned my business license. They mentioned that the county building inspector had been meaning to schedule a review of my property. They mentioned that they were sure I had just been confused that night, given the dark and the circumstances." He stopped. "I have a daughter," he said. "She was 11 years old. The shop is how I take care of her." He looked at his hands. I recanted. The table was quiet. "I've regretted it every single day," he said. "Not just because it was wrong, because I know that's how men like Gerald Holt stay men like Gerald Holt. Because people like me decide the cost is too high." "What changed?" Claire said. He looked at her directly. "My daughter told me about what happened in the library," he said. "She knows Norma. They both take Tuesday evening classes at the community college branch in Millfield. Norma mentioned it. My daughter came home and told me." He paused. "She said some new girl stood up for Norma when nobody else would. She asked me what nobody else would." He picked up his coffee cup, set it down without drinking. "I didn't have a good answer," he said. Claire thought about Norma in the periodicals section, hands shaking. "I am so tired of it." She thought about Brock Sutton driving home 3 years ago, trying to do the right thing, and what it cost him. She thought about the difference between a community that protects people and a community that has forgotten how. "Mr. Sutton," she said, "I have to ask you something honestly." He looked at her. "If you come forward," she said, "if you give a formal statement, it will be on the record. Gerald Holt will know it was you. His attorneys will know. Whatever process follows, you'll be in the middle of it. I know that. Are you prepared for that?" He was quiet for a moment. "My daughter asks me why nobody stood up," he said. "I don't want to be the reason she has to keep asking that question." He reached into his jacket pocket. He put a small USB drive on the table. "I recorded the conversation," he said, "when those 2 men came to my shop. Didn't plan to. I had a voice recorder running in my office because I recorded customer consultations for notes. I forgot it was on." He looked at the drive. "I've listened to it 4 times in 3 years. Every time I almost did something with it. Every time I didn't." He pushed it across the table. "Do something with it." Claire called Everett from the parking lot of the public library. He answered on the second ring. She told him about the recording. He was silent for several seconds. Then he said, "Is the audio clear?" He says, "Yes." Another silence. "Do you understand what this is?" He said, "It's Gerald Holt's people pressuring a witness to change his statement," Claire said. "It is potentially evidence of witness tampering," Everett said carefully, "which is a matter that goes well beyond a school board complaint." He paused. "This needs to go to the right people." "The Tennessee State Board of Education," Megan said. She was standing next to Claire and had heard both sides of the call. "Yes," Everett said, "and potentially further than that. But let's start there." He was quiet for a moment. "There is a woman," he said. "Sandra Webb. She's the chief of staff for the Tennessee State Board of Education. I know her name from my legal work in the 90s. She has a reputation for being extremely difficult to intimidate and extremely thorough about investigation." Claire looked at Megan. "We might know her," she said slowly. Everett paused. "How?" "Our grandmother," Claire said. "Do you know if she and Sandra Webb have any connection?" A silence. "I don't know," Everett said. "But if your grandmother trained the right people, and she trained a great many people over 40 years, I'll call her tonight," Claire said. That night, the call Claire made to her grandmother lasted 41 minutes. It was the longest phone conversation they had had since Dorothy's diagnosis. Not because they didn't talk, but because Dorothy tired easily now and they had both unconsciously started keeping calls shorter. But tonight was different. Claire told her everything. From the first day at Greystone Falls High to Brock Sutton's USB drive sitting on the shelf next to the wooden box. Dorothy listened without interrupting. When Claire finished, there was a pause. Then Dorothy said, "Sandra Webb." Her voice was quiet, but it had a quality in it that Claire recognized. The quality of something that had been sitting in a box for a long time and had just been given permission to be relevant again. "You know her," Claire said. "She was my first student," Dorothy said. "She walked into my dojo in 1979 when she was 9 years old. She tested for her black belt when she was 15. She's a fourth Dan now." A pause. "I haven't spoken to her in 12 years. We just fell out of contact the way people do." "Graham," Claire said. "She's the chief of staff of the Tennessee State Board of Education." The phone was quiet. "Is she?" Dorothy said. Not a question. The tone of someone reorganizing information. "Would she take your call?" Claire said. Another pause. "Sandra Webb," Dorothy said slowly, "once told me that the most important thing I ever taught her was that you don't walk away from something because it's hard. You walk toward it because it's right." She stopped. She said, "She would take my call." "Graham." Claire's voice was something in her chest was not. "You're supposed to be resting. You have surgery on Saturday." "I know when my surgery is," Dorothy said. "I don't want you to, Claire." Her grandmother's voice was gentle and completely immovable. "I have been lying in this bed for 3 months letting other people take care of things. I am not a person who does that easily." A pause. "Let me make one phone call to my oldest student about my granddaughters." Another pause. "You can't honestly tell me you're going to try to stop me." Claire almost laughed. She didn't, but almost. "No," she said. "I can't." "Good," Dorothy said. "I'll call Sandra Thursday. 2 days." Sandra Webb called Everett Calloway at 8 in the morning. Everett called Claire at 8:15. "She's coming Friday," he said, "to the board meeting. As an official observer from the state board, Holt cannot legally exclude her from a public session." Claire sat down. "She's also," Everett said carefully, "bringing someone from the state attorney general's office. Because of the recording." "She moved fast," said. "Dorothy Aldrich calls you," Everett said. "I imagine things move fast." He sounded like he was almost smiling. "There's something else," he said. "I called the school's IT department this morning, formally, in writing, requesting preservation of security camera footage from the library entrance for the past 3 weeks. Under Tennessee Code Annotated Section 10.75050, public institutions are required to preserve records upon formal written request." "The footage of Ryan and Colt going into the library," Claire said. "Ryan and Colt entering the library at 3:52 on Wednesday afternoon," Everett said. 17 minutes before Norma Pierce's shift was scheduled to end. On a day when, according to Norma's written account, they cornered her in the periodicals section. "That confirms they were there." "It confirms they were there," he said. "Combined with her account and what she says was said, it paints a picture." He paused. "Pictures matter." Thursday afternoon was the hardest. Not because anything bad happened, because nothing happened at all. The waiting kind of hard. The kind where you've done what you can do and now the hours between you and Friday simply have to pass. Claire and Megan went to their classes, did their work, ate lunch, walked the hallways at the same pace they always walked them. Ryan and Colt were there, same as always, still presenting that careful, even surface. Ryan watched Claire across the cafeteria at lunch. She looked back. Not a challenge, not an acknowledgement. Just two people aware of each other, across a room, both knowing that something was coming, neither of them showing it. After lunch, Megan found Claire by her locker. "He's nervous," Megan said. "I know, not obviously, but he's checking his phone more than usual. He walked past the main office twice this morning without going in. He's waiting to hear from his father," Claire said. "His father doesn't know yet," Megan said. "About Sandra Webb, about Brock Sutton." "No," Claire said. "He's going into Friday thinking he has everything arranged." "Yes." Megan was quiet for a moment. "Is that fair?" she said. Claire looked at her. "Giving someone a chance to correct themselves before the consequences arrive," Megan said. "Graham always said that. You give them the chance." "He's had the chance," Claire said. "He had it with every student before us. He had it when he came to Brock Sutton's shop. He had it when he called Mom and smiled while he threatened her job." She closed her locker. "The chance doesn't stay open forever." Megan nodded. "No," she said, "it doesn't." They walked to their next class Thursday evening. The phone rang at 7:30. It was their mother. Sarah sounded different, not lighter exactly. but like someone who had put something down that they'd been carrying at an awkward angle for too long. "Sandra Webb called me," she said. "She did?" Claire said. "She called the office at Caldwell Timber and asked to speak with me directly." Sarah paused. "She told me she had been in contact with the State Board's compliance office. She said she wanted me to know that my employment contract was under no circumstance connected to any educational proceedings involving my daughters. She said that connection would be a violation of state employment law." "She put it on the record," Claire said. "She put it on the record," Sarah confirmed. "With my employer." The kitchen was quiet. "She also said," Sarah continued, "that she had spoken with her former teacher recently, and that she wanted me to know my daughters were going to be okay." Claire sat down. "Mom," she said. "I know," Sarah said. "Are you okay?" A pause. "I've been holding my breath for 2 weeks," Sarah said. "I think I just started breathing again." Her voice caught slightly. "You remind me of her, you know, your grandmother. Wait, you didn't panic, you didn't run, you just got methodical." "She trained us to be," Claire said. "She trained you to be," Sarah said. "But you chose to be. That's different. Friday, the day came the way days come when you've been waiting for them, all at once, and then you're in it." Claire and Megan went to school in the morning, attended their classes, sat through the ordinary hours of an ordinary Friday that was not ordinary at all. At lunch, Norma sat with them. She had her notebook with her, the same one Ryan had read from 2 weeks ago. She set it on the table between them and opened it to a board page. "I want you to know something," she said. They waited. "I've been in this school for 2 years, she said. "Working here, taking classes, keeping my head down. I told myself it was practical, that you pick your battles." She looked at the open notebook. "But there's a difference between picking your battles and convincing yourself the battle doesn't matter." She looked up at them. "It mattered," she said. "It always mattered. I just needed someone to walk into that cafeteria and say so out loud first." Claire thought about her grandmother, the first woman in Tennessee to test for 5th Dan, walking into a room with 3 men who had already decided about her. You don't give that kind of presence to people. You build it. Over decades. Through every moment when you could have looked away and didn't. And then you pass it on. "Thank you," Claire said, "for writing down what happened, for being willing to say it." Norma closed the notebook. "Thank you for sitting down at that table," she said. So 4:45 p.m., the Greystone Falls County Board of Education meeting room. It was a public session, which meant anyone could attend, which meant that the room, which usually held the 7 board members, Gerald Holt, and a handful of parents on any given Friday, tonight had 32 people in it. Norma was there. Coach Reed was there. Mrs. Dabney from the front office, who had told Everett about the Monday meeting, who had been in this school system for 21 years and had watched things from the front desk, and had decided at last that watching from the front desk was no longer enough. Brock Sutton sat in the 3rd row with his hands on his knees and his jaw set. Everett Calloway was at the end of the 2nd row, his legal pad on his lap. And in the back, near the door, 2 women sat who had not been at any previous board meeting in Greystone Falls. Sandra Webb was 52 years old. She sat with the posture of someone who had earned the right to take up space, and had been doing so without apology for a long time. Beside her was a younger man from the State Attorney General's office, with a briefcase and the expression of someone who had read the file on the way over and found it interesting. Gerald Holt came in at 4:58. He saw the room. He saw Sandra Webb. Something happened in his face. Very fast. Very controlled. But Claire, who was sitting in the 1st row with Megan, watched it happen. He recognized her. He understood in that moment that something changed about this evening, that the meeting he had planned was not the meeting he was walking into. To his credit, he adjusted quickly. He sat down at the head of the table. He opened his folder. He looked out at the room with the expression he had used successfully for 14 years. He called the meeting to order. The agenda items came in order: budget review, facility updates, the calendar for the upcoming semester, and then agenda item 4. Disciplinary matter involving 2 students. Holt laid it out precisely. The incidents as he had constructed them. The concern for school safety. The need for consistent standards. He was professional. He was thorough. He made it sound like the most reasonable thing in the world. When he finished, he looked at Claire. "I'd like to give the students an opportunity to speak," he said. Claire stood up. She thought about Dorothy on the front step. That nod. "I'd like to present some information to the board," she said, "if that's permitted." One of the board members, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Morse, who had the look of someone who had been on this board long enough to have several things she wasn't proud of, said, "It's permitted." Claire took out the folder. She had organized it the way Everett had told her to organize it. Chronological, clear, no emotional language, just dates, times, descriptions, signatures. On September 9th, she said, at approximately 12:15 in the afternoon in the school cafeteria, Ryan Holt took a personal notebook belonging to Norma Pierce and read from it aloud without her consent. "I witnessed this directly. This is my written account, signed and dated." She placed the first document on the table. September 11th, in the student parking lot, Ryan Holt and Colt Briggs approached my sister and me and explicitly referenced Gerald Holt's position as superintendent as a reason we should adjust our behavior. She placed the second document. "This is our written account, signed and dated," she continued, document by document, each one placed carefully. On September 14th, she said, Ryan Holt and Colt Briggs entered the school library at 3:52 p.m. This is confirmed by the security camera footage at the library entrance, which was formally preserved upon written request. Her Tennessee Code annotated Section 10.7503. She placed the IT preservation confirmation. During this visit, according to the written account of Norma Pierce, who was present, Colt Briggs damaged her property, and Ryan Holt made explicit references to her family's business in the context of suggesting she withdraw cooperation from other students. She placed Norma's account. Norma, in the third row, sat with her hands flat on her knees. On September 16th, Claire said, "My sister and I were called to a meeting with Superintendent Holt. He suggested we withdraw from the school voluntarily and referenced our mother's employment contract as a factor in that decision. This is our written account of that conversation." She placed the final document. The table had a neat row of papers across it. The room was very quiet. "I also want to bring to the board's attention," Claire said, "a pattern that extends beyond our experience here." She looked at Everett. He stood up and came forward. He placed his legal pad on the table. "My name is Everett Calloway," he said. "I am a retired civil rights attorney, currently licensed to practice in Tennessee. I have worked as a library assistant at Greystone Falls High for 9 years. During that time, I have documented, from memory, 5 incidents involving 5 separate students whose difficulties with the current superintendent's family were resolved through external pressure applied to the students' families." He looked at the board. "I have names, approximate dates, and in 2 cases, specific details. I am prepared to provide formal affidavits." Patricia Morse was leaning forward. Holt was very still. Additionally, Everett said, "I want to bring to the board's attention a matter that, in my legal opinion, goes beyond the scope of this proceeding and will require involvement of the appropriate state authorities." He nodded toward the back of the room. The man from the Attorney General's office opened his briefcase. 3 years ago, Everett said, a witness to a traffic incident involving the superintendent was approached by individuals from the county administration and pressured to change his statement to the sheriff's office. That conversation was recorded. He paused. "The recording has been provided to the state attorney general's office." Holt's expression did not break, but something behind it did. Claire watched it happen. She had watched people under pressure for 14 years in competition. She knew what it looked like when some internal architecture started to shift. "Mr. Sutton," Everett said. Brock Sutton stood up. He was shaking slightly. Not enough that everyone could see it, but Claire could see it from the first row. He spoke for 4 minutes. He described what he saw on Route 9 3 years ago. He described the men who came to his shop. He described what they said. He described recanting. "I should have said something sooner," he said at the end. "I let fear make that decision for me. I'm not going to do that anymore." He sat down. The room was very quiet. Patricia Morse was the one who spoke. "Mr. Holt," she said, "I think we need to take a recess." The recess lasted 40 minutes. Claire and Megan sat in the hallway outside the meeting room with Everett on one side and Norma on the other. Brock Sutton sat across the hall. He had his elbows on his knees and was looking at the floor. After a few minutes, Megan got up and sat next to him. She didn't say anything. She just sat there. He looked at her sideways. "You okay?" she said. "No," he said honestly, "but I'm better than I was hours ago." She nodded. "That's usually how it works," she said. He almost laughed. Coach Reed walked over and sat on the other side of Brock. Mrs. Dabney sat next to Norma, and in the hallway outside at a school board meeting room in Greystone Falls, Tennessee, on a Friday evening in September, a small group of people sat together and waited. Nobody said very much. They didn't need to. The board came back at 7:43. Patricia Morse spoke for the board. She spoke for 11 minutes. She said that based on the documentation presented and the recording provided to the State Attorney General's office, the board was initiating an independent external review of the superintendent's conduct, to be conducted by the Tennessee State Board of Education. She said that pending that review, Gerald Holt would be placed on administrative leave. She said that the disciplinary matter against Claire and Megan Aldrich was dismissed entirely and that their records would show no incident of any kind. She said that the board wished to formally apologize to Norma Pierce for the inadequacy of the school's response to her situation over the past 10 years. And she said, looking out at the room, "I want to say something that is not an official motion, but that I believe needs to be said. This board is responsible for what happens in these buildings. We failed in that responsibility, and the people who brought this forward tonight, including 2 young women who were told, essentially, to be quiet and go away, are owed a debt that formal process cannot fully repay. But we intend to try." Gerald Holt left the room without speaking. Ryan was not there. He had not been there. The room stayed quiet for a moment after Holt left. Then Coach Reed started clapping, slowly, deliberately, one pair of hands, then another, then the whole room. Outside, the night had come fully down over Greystone Falls. The October air was real now, not just threatening, cold and clean and smelling like wood smoke from somewhere down the road. Claire and Megan stood on the steps of the administration building. Everett came and stood beside them. "Well," he said. "Well," Claire said. "Your grandmother is going to want a full report," he said. "She's going to get one," Megan said. He was quiet for a moment. "I've been retired for 9 years," he said. "I've been telling myself I was done." He looked out at the street. "I don't think that's true anymore." He said good night and walked to his car. Brock Sutton came out. He stopped beside them for a moment. He looked like he had set something down. Not all the way, but started to. "Thank you," he said, "for giving people a reason to say something." He walked to his truck. Norma came out last. She stood on the step and looked up at the dark sky for a moment. Then she looked at Claire. "What happens next?" she said. "Review process," Claire said. "Probably 6 to 8 weeks for the external review. The Attorney General's office has the recording. That's a separate timeline." Norma nodded. "But for now," Claire said. "For tonight, it's done." Norma took a breath. She had her notebook in her hand, the one Ryan had read from. She looked at it for a moment. "I'm going to start writing in this again," she said. "I stopped after. I didn't want to anymore." She held it against her chest, "But I think I want to again." "Good," Claire said. Norma walked down the steps and turned toward her car. She had her head up. They called their mother from the parking lot. Sarah answered before the first ring finished. Claire told her. All of it. Fast, because Sarah needed to hear it fast. When she was done, Sarah didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "I'm going to cry now." "Okay," Claire said. "I'm going to cry and then I'm going to call your grandmother." "Tell her we'll be there tomorrow," Claire said. "Before the surgery." "You don't have to. We're going to be there," Claire said. "We're going to be there before she goes in. That's not a question." A pause. "Okay," Sarah said softly. "Okay." They drove to Nashville that night. Patty Greer had given them the keys to her second car without being asked. Just pressed them into Megan's hand when they came back to pack an overnight bag and said, "Go see your grandmother." Walter had watched them pack from the doorway. For once, he looked like he understood something. The drive back to Nashville was 2 hours. They didn't talk much. The highway was mostly empty that time of night. Tennessee scrolling past on both sides. Dark hills against a darker sky, the occasional cluster of lights from a town, and then open road again. Claire drove. Megan had the wooden box in her lap. At some point around the 90-minute mark, Megan said she knew we could handle it. "Yes," Claire said. "She didn't tell us what to do. She just gave us the box and said we already knew." "Yes, because we did," Megan said. Claire looked at the road. "We did," she said. The hospital at 1 in the morning had the particular quiet of a place where serious things happened, and people had learned to treat the quiet as something worth protecting. Dorothy Aldrich was awake when they came in. Of course she was. She was sitting up in the bed with a book face down on the blanket and the expression of someone who had been expecting them and was not going to say so. She looked at them both. She looked at the wooden box in Megan's hands. "Sit down," she said. They sat, one on each side of the bed. Claire put the box on the table beside the bed. Dorothy looked at it. Then she reached over and put both palms flat on the lid, the way she had when she closed it in Nashville 2 weeks ago. "Tell me," she said. So they told her. They took turns, the way they had always done. each filling in what the other left space for. They told her everything. From the first day in the cafeteria to the hallway outside the meeting room to Brock Sutton's face when he sat back down after speaking. Dorothy listened without interrupting. When they were done, she was quiet for a moment. "Thorough," she said. "We tried to be," Claire said. "You were?" She looked from one to the other. "You documented. You built the record. You gave people reason to step forward, and then you gave them the space to do it." She paused. "That's not something I taught you in the dojo." "You taught us all of it," Megan said. "I taught you the foundation," Dorothy said. "You built the rest yourselves." She looked at Megan. "You know what that means." "That we're growing up," Megan said. Dorothy smiled. It was the smile Claire had grown up with, the one that meant the same thing every time. "It meant I see you. It meant I'm proud of what I see. It meant you didn't need me to tell you that, but I'm going to tell you anyway." "Yes," Dorothy said. "That's what it means." She reached over and opened the wooden box. She lifted the obi out, held it in both hands the way she always held it, like something worth holding carefully. Then she held it out, not to Claire, not to Megan. She held it in the space between them so they both reached for it at the same time. Their hands met in the middle. Dorothy covered them both with her own. Her hands were still calloused, still knuckled, still the hands that had folded this belt more times than any of them could count. "Surgery is at 8, she said. "You two are going to get some sleep." "We're not leaving," Claire said. "I know you're not leaving," Dorothy said. "You're going to sleep in those 2 chairs in the corner. The nurses won't say anything. I already talked to them." Of course she had. Megan almost laughed. "Graham," she said. "What?" "Nothing," she said. "Just you." Dorothy put the OB back in the box and closed the lid. She looked at her granddaughters, both of them, for a long moment, the way you look at something when you want to make sure you're seeing it completely. "I am so proud of you," she said. Simple as that. No elaboration, no performance, just the truth stated plainly by a woman who had spent 74 years learning that the truth was always enough. They slept in the chairs, uncomfortable chairs, the kind that were clearly not designed for sleeping but were present in hospital rooms because sometimes people needed to stay. Claire woke up twice in the night. Both times she looked at her grandmother, sleeping now, the even rise and fall of her breathing, her hands folded on the blanket the way she folded everything, deliberately, at rest but not absent. Both times Claire thought about the word that kept coming back to her, thorough, not just in terms of the case, in terms of everything Dorothy had done. 40 years of building something, a dojo, a community of students, a way of being in the world that she had passed on, not by lecturing but by demonstrating it every single morning before breakfast for her entire adult life. That's what gets passed down without words. Not the kicks, not the belts, the way of being. The knowledge that you can stand in a hard place and not lose yourself there, that you can be quiet without disappearing. That patience is not the same as passivity. The most powerful thing you can do sometimes is wait until you understand the situation completely, and then move once, precisely, with everything you have. Ryan Holt did not return to Greystone Falls High after the board meeting. He enrolled in a school 2 counties over in January. Whether that was his choice or his father's, nobody said. But the hallway felt different in his absence. Not celebrated, just quieter. The way a room feels when something heavy has been moved out of it.